this right. Dan Koboldt. Did I get
That's
that?
right. You got it.
I am almost a trained professional here. Almost, as we are on the air here. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Up and down week. Like I had a so like I'm a freelancer, right? So freelance life. My payment from a company got delayed 2 weeks. They didn't decide. I had to find that out the hard way. And then my one gig turned out to be a scam. So I cannot wait for August to be over.
Yeah, you got to stop replying to those emails from Nigerian princes. That's all I can say.
I hate. Listen, they offered me $10 million. I mean, you have to.
All you need to do is send them a little bit of money. Yeah,
That's right. That's right. No, that's totally right. No, actually, funny thing was I looked up. They were a legit company. Like they called me from a legit place. All that stuff, and all the information they wanted was typical for companies. And then when they started, it's like, hey, we need access to your bank accounts. Like, no.
That should raise some alarms.
Oh, that was the end. It's like, I'm not doing that. It's like, I'm not. It's like, but it's one of those moments when you see it, you go, how did they how does this happen, right? But
the thing is, all they have to do is ask like 500 people like you to do that, and one of them will do it. So.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's it, right? So they can do a complete identity theft, because when you give employees information, they could theoretically do that with most of that information, but they need like the last little bits of that. And yeah, I know it's just one of those. It's one of those moments where you just kind of look at it and go, okay, that is weird. That is, how did this happen, right? And but again, it's the ups and downs of freelancing. Like it's not like you have to realize like when you make that decision to go that route, you just have to make you're choosing to take that risk. And unfortunately, that's the downside. The upside is, I mean, you get to do some cool, fun things, like that you don't expect to be paid for, right? And it's like, hey, that's really cool, right? But it is what it is, right? So I'm just finishing, and while we're doing this, I'm also like, advertising on Discord, because again, I am a trained professional that way, and I just do this thing. So totally done. But no, it's like that is literally it. Although I find most people, when I go, how are you, they expect it to just be good or so or a word, and they don't actually get into that very much anymore.
Yeah, it's been a loaded question lately for the past couple of years, though.
Yeah.
You never know what kind of answer you're going to get.
But I always enjoy. I'm crazy this way. I always enjoy the fun. Yeah. Because I'd rather a human response than a generic one. You know what I mean? That maybe that's just me. That might be just me, but that's just how it is. I think people are always fascinating. So
it occurs to me that would be a good test for an AI, where you ask how are you, and then get like a canned response, and then you follow up with like, no, really, how are you? And an AI would not really realize that that's like a follow-up question to really ask if you're okay and tell me what's going on in your life. But so it's a good test.
Yeah.
I recommend that.
And yeah. Well, I mean, you do work for an angry robot, right? So.
Well, I mean, they're my publisher, so
yeah.
Technically.
Well, I should say that.
I mean, yeah, I suppose you could say I work for them in a manner of speaking. So.
Well, it's
I do like that. I mean, they make no secret of the fact that we're all in service of some robot overlord, and I enjoy that.
They're openly honest. Like, yep, we're an angry robot. We're taking over, but we like books. So come get some. So come submit to us. And actually, is of all like the little like publishing houses, I think they do some of the coolest books. They actually do some really neat stuff.
Yeah, they do. I love it. I know a number of their authors, and so I was excited to get to work with them too for that reason. I think they're doing some amazing things.
Yeah. So I mean, and you did, and I mean, you got the Silver Queen. I wish I had more time to read it than I did. I am definitely, but I read the synopsis of it. It was like, I want this book. It was really like, it was a neat idea. I thought, okay, that's fun. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I just might happen to have one of these over. Yeah, okay. So my book, Silver Queendom. So basically, it's about a team of con artists in a fantasy world. That's what the book is about. So I've been pitching it as Ocean's 11 in epic fantasy or something like that. But it's a story about people that are come together, call them thieves, but it's people that have learned morally gray ways to get by in life, and they find each other and they form up as a crew, and they work out of this rundown inn back in the backwater of this crumbling monarchy, which is a queendom. So hence the title.
Yes.
And so, for the most part, they pull small-time jobs. They're trying to avoid attention, not attract attention. But they keep up in the ante here, and then eventually they fall in debt to their boss, who's like the local crime boss, and they have to take on a big job, something they normally wouldn't try and do. And so it's heisting this very well-protected shipment. Then it becomes sort of a classic heist story with like the super viable thing that's incredibly well protected and the detailed, intricate plan to steal it and get away clean. But it's all in a fantasy world, so that's why I love it.
Well, I think heist stories are just fun. They're just fun. Like
I love them.
yeah, no, because you get to play with the audience in a really fun way. Because I mean, up front, when you read any story like this, the protagonist of the story. We're just gonna say protagonist because a good guy, bad guy might be a bit much for a story like that, right? But the protagonist isn't exactly reliable. They're trying to pull a fast one, even on the reader, right? So it's actually
Right,
kind
you
of
wonder
fun.
how much they're going to tell you because there's going to be misdirection, right? And knowing how much will be revealed from the point of view, it's a interesting balance, that's for sure.
Yeah. So was it hard keeping it straight in your head? Or
Well, I think that there are a lot of moving pieces, and I had a pretty good idea of where I wanted the story to go. But I think the hardest part is juggling multiple POV characters where it's really tight points of view. So, I mean, they know what they know, and I don't try and hide information and be coy that way with whoever's narrating. Like, you have access to their head and what they know about this. So, trying to make it so that we could tell the story from the right point of view at the right time, but not give everything away about the full-on plan and what's coming. I think that's the hard part in writing one of these things.
well, yeah, because again, it's also like there's like three different levels to this, which is the level of the job, because that has to be
Yeah.
done. Then there's the level of what does each character get out of this, right? And what's interesting is it, like, depending on what the character actually wants, what are they willing to do to get it? Right? And sometimes, and almost always, I would imagine that the big boss is also a bit of a con man himself. He'd have to be to keep these guys in line.
Yeah.
So what's his real game, right? Like, it's one of those things where it's just like there's a lot of levels to it, right? Right, and so I think the way you would do something like that is it basically what the character doesn't know is perfect way to hide it without actually lying to the audience.
Right. And, there are antagonistic forces in this book. And that's, of course, the great unpredictable eight ball in anything like this. They're pulling this heist, but they're not the only ones after it. So that's a constant source of stress for them. Like, what's that other team trying to do? How are they going to go about it? They're both going for the same thing. They know it. They're rival crews. They really don't like each other. So, there's that element of keeping each other on their toes, but we only really see the one side. And
Exactly.
I like what you said, about the different levels, because I think another level that for me this book has is what do the characters bring as far as their reason for doing it, but also their baggage and their ancient past that affects everything that they do and gave them the right skill set to be the right team member for this job. That's something I worked really hard on. It's kind of fun to work into this because you have the immediacy of the heist, and then you have all the how did we have that part of the glimpse of how they got here and what brought them to this moment trying to do this crazy thing.
Well, I think one of the more interesting things when you deal with like specialist characters that are got special skills.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. But they think differently too, because they're so deep into their expertise, whatever that is. They just see stuff nobody else sees. And I speak like that because, again, just I've been doing this podcast for a long time, and because I've been doing it, I've acquired skills. Right, there's things I just think about in terms of interviews and stuff that other people don't, because I've just done it for a long. I've done this for a long, long, long time, right? And that's the thing, right? There's a and every specialist, like if you look at any kind of specialized field, everybody has that kind of thing where they think like that a little bit, because it's like, well, I bring this to the table and I see it this way and this way and this way because of this and this, and it's fascinating, right? Because it's also a very cool way to see, because usually people that are real specialists at something, they generally love what they do. On some level, they love it. So it's really cool to see that passion kind of play out on, like in fun ways.
I agree, and another element my book has is there's each character, they're specialists at like a certain thing, and then the rest of their life is like a mess. That's the best
Yeah.
part. Like this one thing that you need them to do, they're outstanding at it. And then because they all have this cover, they're working in this ramshackle inn, like running an inn, and so because that's not really what they do to make a living. It's not the best customer service in there, right? I mean, they're actively trying to both maintain the cover, but not encourage that many people come in and need to be like waited on. So I have fun with that, where like somebody can be really good at something and bad at a lot of other things.
I'm just asking this. Did you ever do customer service way back at like once upon a time? I'm just
Oh
curious.
yeah, I did.
God, yeah. Okay.
Everyone's been on one side or the other of like the customer service nightmare, and so what. And the thing is, most people in customer service jobs. This is the weird fundamental thing about humanity. Like the customer service is like the front lines for this, and generally speaking, those people are not invested at all in the company, or they're like this is just a job for them. And so people are always like taking it out on them, and they take all the abuse. And really, it's not like they own the company and have stock and are going to do well with the customers are happy. So so that customer service, I know what good customer service looks like, and I know what bad customer service looks like, and so do most people.
I've done both. Like I've done the good customer service, I've done the bad customer service, right? And I've been on both ends of it. Like when it's just a job, yeah, there's only so much abuse. I've gotten to the point where I'm older / we'll say wiser. Well, we don't know for 100% for sure, but we'll just say wiser for the sake of argument. You just realize that there's only so much you can take. Like I said, the cat, like, and after a while, you'd be like, ma'am, sir, I don't like, I understand your frustration, but to be honest with you, there's nothing I can do. Right. So, and I try to walk away at this point when I've done that. But I've also been like, I also know what good customer service looks like. When people genuinely care, it definitely comes out. So, but from a writing standpoint, bad customer service is hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious.
Oh, it's great. I mean, all of my books have some of that to some degree, and I enjoy it because it's commentary on what it's really like to live in the world, because nothing is perfect in this world. So.
No, and sometimes. So okay, personal story. What is the weirdest customer service experience you've had? We're gonna say weird because it could be good or bad. I don't, right? Just weird.
I mean, the most recent one, this thing is like a family joke for us, is from just being at McDonald's one time, and we were just there having our dinner. It was like 8 o'clock at night, and just out of nowhere, just one employee yells, "I just want to go home!" like at the top of his lungs. I mean, everyone in the building heard it, and it was, like very strange. And I sympathize, but at the same time, it's like, whoa, like only in McDonald's can you really get away with that kind of stuff in your.
We're gonna say fast
He probably
food.
did really want to go home. So anyway, now the reason that came to mind is not because it's the worst thing I've experienced. It's definitely not, but it's just a running joke when we're like all tired and we just like can't take anything more. One of us will just be like, "I just want to go home," and then it's funny.
Yeah, so
it's not a shared experience that guy has no idea he's a part of.
He changed your life without ever actually realizing he changed your life.
Now, what about you? What's your weird customer service story?
So I worked in the fast food industry way back in the 20s. So here's the thing. I'm not going to go into too much.
Did you say the 20s or your 20s?
My 20s.
Okay, just
My
clarify.
20s. Yeah, my 20s. The 20. I mean, again, as a freelancer, it might be possible. I have flip burgers. Yeah, it's possible.
There's only like the past 2 years, so it would be difficult to do.
So I mean, it might be possible in the future. Who knows? What I will say is, so I used to work at Taco Bell late night.
Wow.
I'm just gonna say the one thing I've learned in any late night fast food place, right? You're not aware.
Are you about to ruin Taco Bell for me?
I could ruin any. I could.
Don't. I already can't eat at Arby's, so please, like,
I won't. Okay, I won't ruin Taco Bell. This is what I will tell you: be nice to those people at night.
Oh yeah.
Be very, very nice, because they can get away with a lot of things that nobody else can.
That's a great lesson for life, and honestly, it's something I teach my kids. I'm like, anyone that handles your food, you should always be polite and nice to. Even if you're like so mad and angry, you can, like, they are the person that's bringing you your food. You got to keep a level of respect, politeness.
Especially during the daytime. Believe it or not, during daytime, they're more liable to get away with that. I'm not encouraging,
because there are managers on duty and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, the night managers, they don't care.
Oh.
Right, no, because again, it's stressful. Think about the fast food industry. If you really want to be honest, it's probably one of the most stressful jobs, because you're constantly rushing to make food. Like, you're trying to make an order. Fast food is literally what it is. Fast food. So you're trying, like Taco Bell. You're trying within 5 minutes of you making that order. Within 5, you got your meal. That's the ideal service for a fast food place. At night, when supplies are short, when there's less supervision, less staff, it becomes very stressful. It can be very, very stressful during rushes. So if there's the tendency is at night, if someone wants to push the envelope, you're now their pressure release, and it's a damn thing you can do about it. So, especially at night,
right?
It's
funny because in the modern world, we now have, like, there's a lot of tools now where people can warn each other about, like, doing things like this and like, oh, don't go to that restaurant past 10 p.m. We're all constantly reviewing and rating things and stuff like that. But that's a pretty new phenomenon. Before all this tech, everyone pretty much relied on word of mouth. I mean, that's even true in my book. Like, you have these people running an inn. It's in a backwater. So really, word of mouth is how people might, one, find out that there's an inn somewhere around here and go there, and what the service is like. And another running gag that's like happening is they have this ale maker who brews this ale, and she is just not good at it. Like, she's been trying hard to brew ale, but, like, she has not cracked the code yet. So the ale is universally bad tasting. I mean, they use it to clean the countertops, honestly. So,
oh, geez. Okay.
But it was kind of like that. But then again, you have to, as a potential customer in this setting, you have to decide, like, what am I willing to do to drink? So a lot of people are willing to manage the bad taste of it. So it's just another running thing. Like, we don't want to draw people and have this place be constantly crowded. I mean, but we have to exist as some sort of apparent business. So it's just a trick they use. Like, they're not pushing her too hard to make the ale very good, and she's succeeding without even knowing it.
That's amazing. So now you got me, like, going to some like, my dad's a naturopath, but he would always experiment with, like, nutritious stuff at home. So in my younger days, he couldn't make it palatable to save his life.
Oh man.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's
his
tough
older
to make.
years. Yeah, his older years he figured it out, but his younger years, oh man. No, he oh my god, no, it's one of those situations where the one thing about today, it's easier now to figure out how to make stuff palatable. You can research a lot quicker on information if you really want
you don't
to.
have to experiment as much. You can look up what everyone else has done.
There's a bit, because it's weird, because it's one of those, I truly believe that there's, like, a human element to everything we make. Right? Something that might work for somebody else may not work for you, but you have at least an idea of the direction you should be going for the most part. Right? And, but even then, I mean, like I said, I've told this story before. My dad made this like one, like it was a internal cleaner, but it was supposed to taste like apples. It did not. It really, really did not. It really, really did not. He tried it twice, and the second time was even worse. He put more apples in and got less result. It's like,
Man, you know what? He could work at that inn that I have.
yeah, no, totally. No,
He's so qualified for
no,
it.
no, no. That's like when you brought that up, it's like, no, I can totally. But again, it's like anything else. It's that search for the right thing. But again, I do think there's a little bit of a personal experiencing. You could actually do as a gag if you do a sequel to this book. She gets a good recipe, but she just for whatever reason can't make the damn thing work.
Right.
Right. You just can't. For whatever reason, there's like, she's like, I did everything right. Like I don't understand, and it's like one of those befuddling moments of, oh my god, like, and everybody else and somebody else tries. I don't know what she's doing, but yeah.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite things about this is it's a small thing, so it's not really a big spoiler or anything. But because they produce ale, and ale has, theoretically some value in this world, they use it to get into places sometimes and make inroads at new places. And it's always funny because brewer carries in the barrel and like, here, bringing you some ale to try out, and everyone's all excited. And in the crew is using this to like get a foot in the door and surveil the place and see what.
Oh yeah.
And then you're waiting for that shoe to drop of like someone actually tasting it, and it's so all this stuff is going on. The crew's getting in to do whatever they do, and you're just waiting for like the first person to drink it. Oh man, I have fun with it. What can I say?
No, you're enjoying your world. Like I can totally tell you've enjoyed putting this together.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, like, obviously, you've been doing this for a while. And looking back at like, I personally like the Silver Queen cover a little bit better than the Deploying Dragons cover. But like you said, you've been doing this for quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, so this is book 7 and book 8. Believe it or
Yeah.
not. So, and it's Silver Queendom. You got to put the dumb on the end because it's
Yes.
not about the queen; it's about the place.
Yes.
But
I am almost.
I will say though, I appreciate what you said, and I just love this cover. I think it's so
It's perfect.
It's so clearly says what the book is. It's epic fantasy. It's eye catching, and we went round and round. I mean, we worked really hard to get the cover where it was. Alice Coleman is the artist who did this in Angry Robot, and like we went through several rounds because here's the problem: like they're like, hey Dan, do you have any thoughts for what the cover could be? And I had this dumb idea in my head. It's like, oh, they're always working out of this ramshack win. It's like, hey, yeah, what about something with this cool old building that they work in? And then they mocked it up, and it was like round 1 of the cover thing. And then I realized that like a building by itself is really boring. I was like, oh god, this is so dumb. Why did I give them this idea? Because they did exactly what I said, and I looked at it and I was like, that's not going to do it. Like no one's going to want to read this. It's like just an old broken down building with no context at all.
No.
So I was like, okay, scrap that idea. And then we just started like prototyping some other things, and they came up with several designs like this shadow design. There was like different figures with different profiles, ranges of weapons, etc. There was one I really liked. It was like a character with 2 axes jumping, and I was like, that's really awesome. But that's almost like too hardcore. Like my characters, they're not really trying to get into fights whenever they can. If they get in a fight, they have already stacked the odds so much that they're pretty much guaranteed to win. They're not big into like the honorable fair fight. That's just how they operate. So anyway, well, like we went round and round, and I think they totally knocked it out of the park with the cover. And even though I'm sure everyone in the art department was totally losing patience with Dan Koboldt, we get so many compliments on the cover. Everyone loves the cover, and I'm always like, yeah, well, Angry Robot, they did it. I don't talk about the part how like I made their lives very difficult by being demanding and asking for this, but they really delivered, and I just love the way it looks.
No,
and, I love my dragon covers too. I mean, the thing is, this is a Baen cover. Baen books, they have a certain look to their books.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually in a bookstore today, and you
I
spot a Baen book from 20 feet away. Just from the way that the covers are styled. They're like golden age sci-fi, but it's a brand new book. They're very easy to spot. And so Some people are like, oh, Baen covers, they look so different. Maybe some people saying outdated. I'm like, they have a very solid brand. And people who love Baen books, like that's what they go for. They're like, oh, there's the Baen book. That's the Baen title. I'm going to get it. And they have such tremendously loyal readers. It's working for them, so I
Oh,
can't fault it. And I mean, if you look at it, the quality of the art, it's kind of hard to appreciate. Like the artist who's Dave Seeley, the stuff he can do drawing these dragons and creatures. And this book cover was almost a surprise because I got some input on the first book. My Domesticating Dragons cover. I'm sure I have that somewhere around here. I'll see if I can find it. But oh yeah, I've got one right here. So this is another pretty classic Baen cover, right? It's got that certain font and style of graphics. And this one I came up with some ideas. I was like, this would be a cool scene. There's like a dragon jumping at the guy, and he's in a suit for his interview, and there's a dragon like trying to eat him, and he's like, am I sure I want this job? And I mean, there's like very high quality. There's like a reflection of people in the glass. It's just amazing quality art that I would never be able to do. So the artistic quality is amazing to me, and I salute the people who can do it. And the most important thing for me is like convey what kind of book this is and make it stand out a little bit on the shelf. If you can do that, you're golden.
I agree with you. But on personal, I do like the Domesticating Dragon cover better than the Deploying Dragon cover. And I'm looking at it and I'm trying to figure out why exactly. Because you're right, it's not about artistic quality. Right. All right. But I'm looking at it. I think you know what it is. I think what it is, and maybe I'm not seeing it correctly from here. Right? Is I think that the Deploying Dragons, it doesn't from an action standpoint. Right.
I mean, it's more static. I have to say that the thing what I love about this cover is, like I said, with Angry Robot, we went round and round. They were like, give me your ideas, and then my ideas were terrible, as we said, and they came up we eventually got there, right?
Yeah.
With Deploying Dragons, it was literally like the publisher was like, hey, here's your cover. Hope you like it, because they know what their brand is. They know how to design these things.
Yeah.
And this scene, this is a scene from the book. And so I was like, wow, I would never have thought that should be the scene that you would depict on this, but yeah, I can see that. And it's got a guy in a jetpack on some dragons. I was like, that's great.
Yeah.
They had already put this thing together, and I know that they know what they're doing. So sometimes as an author, you got to stand up and be like, I think the cover should be different. And then other times you gotta hold back and say, trust them, they know what they're doing. And that was the case here. It was like, I'm gonna make a ton of input here, and then this, for the Baen book, it's like, I trust them, they know what they want to do, they want to put the right thing on. And people who love Baen books are gonna go for it. So it works.
And I should, like I said, reiterate this. Baen has a very good track record. They are the what I would call the quintessential mid-tier sci-fi publisher. They know exactly who they are. They offer things to a very, very specific kinds of audiences, and they do very well with them.
They do, and they've done that independently. They've been doing this for a long time. They know the business well, and they just have a very large loyal readership that just love all their books. It's a great position to be in, honestly. And the other thing about Baen is when I went to the bookstore, because Baen title covers are so distinct, I had snapped photos. I often do it when I go to a bookstore. I take photos of the shelves in the sci-fi section for a couple of reasons. One, I'm gonna see, remember what books are out there, what books are getting placed where, and what books are prominent, and are my friends' books on there, because I have a lot of authors that do this too. But I happen to take these pictures of this Barnes and Noble sci-fi fantasy section, and then I was looking at them later, and I was like, oh my god, look at all the Baen books I can see, because you can spot them. And I was like, that's a Baen book. That's a Baen book. So I came up with this image that I'll have to send you, because you'll get a kick out of this. I took this image. It was of two of their shelves, and I drew this little neon arrow at every Baen title, because you could spot it even in a photo. And I stopped at over 20. They place their books in bookstores, and they do a great job with that. So that's all you want as an author.
Well, yeah, again, if you're looking at this, actually the two companies you're mentioning right there, they're the two that have the most bookshelf space in science fiction. I actually feel sad when I look at a lot of the bookshelves in science fiction these days. I don't mind that fantasy has such a huge part of the huge bookshelf. I remember back in my day, and I say to the clouds and tell them to shut up, right? I do remember when the science fiction section was bigger, right, than what it is now. And I think, and it's a shame too, because I honestly like looking at the indie realm of things just a little bit. There's a lot of great science fiction out there right now. There really, really is. And it's like, why is there only like like there's 4 shelves for fantasy and like 1.5 for science fiction. And I kind of miss the days of
Part of it though is the readership and technology, because you have huge ebook and audiobook consumption in genre fiction. Like people
yeah,
read sci-fi are generally tech people, a lot of them. And so I think that could be part of why. You know, if you think about certain other genres are like take the book with you and read it curled up by the fireplace genres, and they want the physical book. And sci-fi readers is like all these people with tablets and phones and computers and stuff, and maybe you can get away with it more. Maybe that has something to do with it.
I can push back slightly because I've dealt with some science fiction companies.
Yeah.
What I honestly think it's actually ironic. The most advanced like publishing in terms of like ebooks, tech, and stuff like that, believe it or not, romance. Right.
Well, I'm not counting. Romance is its own genre, and I think they're the leaders in
Everything.
so many things, like the indie authors and stuff, and marketing and romance, and just like honestly, I don't know how they write so fast. That's part of the thing that's amazing to me. It's like, yeah, that they can
Oh
churn
yeah.
out so many books in a short time. But yes, romance is its own animal, and we have to all bow down to romance. It's just that is an
Yeah.
amazing genre. I don't write. I could never write it. I mean, I'm hard pressed to write a romantic scene, much less an entire book. But the stuff that those authors can do, and how that industry has changed, and like especially embraced indie publishing and like super readers who really go through so many books and are voracious for it. They like want more. They're like, no, give me more of this family. I know that brother's not married yet. Get me a book on the. It's amazing. I have huge respect for that.
I know one romance. She releases a book every 6 weeks. Like it's just yeah. No, it's just
Incredible.
yeah. No, it's no. But I mention it like this because I think this is the irony of science fiction. A little bit of the irony. I'm not talking necessarily like all publishers, but I think in some ways science fiction might be the most behind in terms of the technological advances on it, which I think the irony is interesting there. I think because again, you look at let's look at some of the other genres like thriller. There's a lot of thriller on it. Like you go into a bookstore, a lot of thriller there. There's a lot of indie thriller, but there's a lot of thriller in there. But like the 2 genres that have disappeared in the last 10, 20 years are horror. There's some Barnes and Noble books that don't even have a horror section anymore. I've seen a few of that. That one's disappeared the most, although there's still some, again, really good horror out there. And that one you might, I think, right? But science fiction is the other one that's slowly shrunk a little bit in the bookstores.
I don't know. I think it ebbs and flows. I thought you were going to say, honestly, genre disappearing. I was going to say Western. That's the
Westerns,
other
but Westerns disappeared like for a long time.
Totally
Yeah.
gone. And I think horror has shrunk. Maybe seeing a little resurgence with the popularity of things like Stranger Things that have horror elements. I don't know. I think, for me, I just accept that my lot in life is generally to be part of the redheaded stepchild of whatever thing I'm in. So like I know I'm going to write genre fiction, and of course it's gonna be like science fiction, fantasy. It's the redheaded stepchild of all genre fiction, like the thing that just persists and doesn't go away, but it's not the big visible thing. I mean, the genres that you mentioned, like thriller, has huge readership because it's general readership. Like those things get put in airports and things like that. But I will say, counter to your point, look at the resurgence of people reading fantasy in the wake of Game of Thrones. Like there are so many people that would never have picked up a fantasy doorstopper, and then suddenly Game of Thrones is out, and they're like, "So I'm reading, Clash of Kings or whatever." And it's like, for me, I'm thrilled because it's normally like I'm the only person reading the super long, geeky science fiction or fantasy novels. Now it's like everybody. It's like my cousins and my aunts are reading this stuff. I love that aspect of it. Certain things will bring it to mainstream. and then suddenly everyone's into it. Now, eventually that'll pass, but I like it. I
Maybe,
enjoy it when it happens.
maybe not. I mean, look at what Brandon Sanderson did this year on Kickstarter. Yeah, right. I mean, I think, like I said, something I said earlier, like fantasy is like you go to a lot, like young adult fantasy has a very healthy place on the bookshelves. Are they the biggest? No, but they are, well, young adults huge, but fantasy is solid. Like I'm
Young
usually
adult
seeing,
fantasy, yeah. I mean, they have a really strong presence, and it's a very popular genre. But I'm super optimistic when it comes to fantasy because if you
oh
think
yeah,
about it, the generation of kids that all grew up on Harry Potter are all adults now.
yeah.
And they're not necessarily looking for the middle grade young adult Harry Potter stuff. They're looking for adult fantasy. So I'm bullish where it comes to that, John.
No. I think fantasy is in a relatively healthy place, actually, all things considered, right? I mean, even how it's evolving. Like, I mean, you're doing a heist fantasy novel. I mean, seriously, that's really freaking cool. Someone like
Oh, thanks.
Someone like Fonda Lee is doing a Gangs of New York style
Yeah, I
fantasy, which I
love
think
it.
is just badass, right? And then David Weber, like you talk about Baen, like he does some fantasy that's really, really interesting too. And even like I said, and going to the indie realm, I'm looking at people like Christopher Russell, seeing like people like Veronica Roth and man, Bardugo. That's Leah Bardugo
Leave
doing
Bardu, yeah.
yeah, doing adult fantasy now as well is actually a really like I think fantasy is in a healthy place, also in an interesting place. I think so this is a personal theory of mine, and maybe I'm crazy thinking about this. I've come to the point where I'm reading like what I call the two tome fantasies a year. Like maybe so a Brandon Sanderson like Storm like archive level like that
Is that
dense.
counting for both your tomes?
It could, right? That one could, right?
Yeah.
But like that's one, and maybe I'll read one more, like a different one. But I bring it up like that just to say like there's like I think there's a it's in a good place, but I think it's like to make a book that big, you got to be really really good. But I think where I think where it's really healthy is almost at that like dime novel slash maybe a little bit bigger dime to mid-sized novel. I think there's a lot of room in the market for those kind of books right now because I get right because I'm looking at it going, people don't necessarily want to always read like with all due respect to Mr. Sanderson, a brick, right? A brick of a book. Sometimes you just want a quick like sometimes you just want to steal a random awesome object of power from an evil mob boss before somebody else does. And I somehow feel like I'm not going to go be reading your book quite as long as that. And I think there's a lot of space in that area. So
I'm all for that because I can't write as fast as Brandon can. And
no.
so for me, like 100,000 words, if I can get there, that's like the best I can do. And so I'm glad to hear that. And it's true. I mean, I think something else we see with fantasy is lots of streaming companies making their big bet on like a fantasy property,
Oh yeah.
right? So you see the HBO is making their big bets, and also Amazon, they're putting all their money into this Lord of the Rings. It's like, wow, just so you guys know, that's epic fantasy. So if you're the fan of the biggest thing on that property, you are now an epic fantasy fan. I enjoy
They
talking
have both
about
Lord of the Rings and Wheel of Time, right?
yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah, right. So and Wheel of Time, let's be perfectly blunt, you can't do a movie on that. You have to do a series. If you're going to do that one, you have to do a series.
so yeah, just so much. There's just so much to it, and that's and they also did. You can make the same argument for Dune. Dune, I'm like, man, this movie is so good. It's like just getting going. I'm like, well, wait, it's over. Like what? Now, how long do I have to wait? I'm like, do you know how many Dune books there are? So I'm almost impatient with it.
Well, yeah, no, but it's just because okay, so Dune and Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, the original series. Although I'm of a weird place with Dune, I feel Dune. The odd books are amazing, and the even books are so. That's just like that's just like it's just that's where I'm at. Like the only book I give him a pass on is the last one because he knew he didn't have a lot of time to live and he was just trying to finish the story as quickly as he could, right? But
I mean, I honestly I love all the house novels, like the ones
yeah,
that his
oh yeah,
son Kevin Anderson.
oh
I just like I love all those, and there's still this huge chronology and world that they're just exploring one side of it. I love all those books. I mean, there's just
No,
so much.
oh, absolutely. But what I was getting at is like much like Tolkien, like Herbert and Tolkien have like this core fantasy which you can make
Yeah.
movies out of, and then they have this entire world that you can
So,
play with,
I know with
right?
Tolkien too, like his entire created world and these other books that like really only hardcore Tolkien fans are reading, the Cimmerillion and all these
Yeah.
create like things that he made. But yes, you're right. There's a huge, rich world, and I think honestly, I think that's why places like Amazon are betting on it.
Yeah.
They're like, look, we have this property, we have to deal with one estate, and then we have this entire world that we can build. That's pretty like do whatever we want, and these incredible, fantastic stories. So,
So
and the technology is there to do it. I'm like, please make these things. I will watch them.
there's two I'm really hoping do see the light of day eventually. Pern. I think
Yeah. Oh man.
there's an
Dragons.
incredible
I love it.
potential with that, right? I mean, there's incredible potential with that one. I love, but my favorite, like, so the other two, actually, I have one more. Michael Moorcock. I would love to see either Elric or I love Corum. I think not Corum, sorry, Hawkmoon. Hawkmoon's world is batshit nuts. I think it'd be fun to actually see something like that. But the other one I would love to see is at least the first 5 books. Rogers of Lasny's Amber,
Hmm.
because I think Amber's really cool. I think it's one of those really neat little underrated worlds that you could do really cool shit with.
It's funny you say that because I was talking with a friend of mine the other day how I heard that Disney is maybe planning to remake Aragon,
Yeah.
which
Oh,
which
thank God.
I mean, I'm with you. Like on one hand, like wow, I don't know what went wrong, but the adaptation was terrible. On the one hand, I'm feel that way. On the other hand, I'm like, hey, have you heard of all these other fantasy books out there? Like that one had its shot. I know it was terrible, but I'm always bothered at the concept of a remake because I know the tiny, tiny fraction of all the great books out there that people are writing that get adapted to screen. And I'm always like, don't rehash something we already tried. Like, go for something new and different. That's what I wish they would do more. So they'd take more risks, try new things.
I have two responses to that. I actually, in theory, agree with you. There's a business reason for that, but I do know their business argument. The business argument for Aragon is it did really well as a book. I think so. In the very beginning, when we were doing all these like adaptations initially, the movie industry did not respect books. That's why you can look at Aragon in particular and go, you know, Pellini must have had a really nice paycheck, but he probably loathes that movie. Just absolutely loathed it because it wasn't great. Like it just really wasn't great, and the story wasn't done, and all that other wonderful fun stuff. Now, again, seeing the success of Game of Thrones, seeing the success of some of these other ones, you're gonna look at the big properties and kind of see it's like, well, we could really do something with it. It's almost like when Sony originally got all the Marvel characters. Some of them, okay, I want to see a good Fantastic Four movie someday in my life. I really want to see it. Sony's never done it, ever. Like it has been painful to watch that, but I would love to see it. So there's a little bit of me that gets it from the business
Yeah,
standpoint.
I do. My response to that and is that anytime something gets adapted, it almost doesn't matter how the books did
Yeah,
because there you can put so much money behind something you've done a good job with. And then look at what happens to the bestseller list. It's always
oh, yeah.
like that thing. And part of me is like, that was already a bestseller. So it seems unequitable from a point of view of like the many authors on the mid list. It's like, oh, we're going to bet on the absolute sure thing. It's already a bestseller. It's like, yeah, you could do that, or you could really spread it around more and be creating bestsellers on solid properties that you could probably license and option for much less. Honestly, I mean, by the time you're George Martin and Game of Thrones is selling however many copies it is, I'm sure it was not cheap for HBO to get the rights. So I'm like, business decision. You might want to look in other areas that show promise that aren't like super bestseller status that you think could become a hit picture, because I think there's a lot of stuff that falls in that category, including some of the ones you mentioned.
So Okay, I actually overall agree with you. I'm going to tell you.
You
But
always say that, and then you go on to disagree. But
no. But I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I'm playing devil's advocate on this one because I do think this needs to be said. I remember when Rowling's Harry Potter was going to be made. I know this story from an relatively inside source. Someone was trying to get a movie deal within Warner Brothers, and they were telling stories. And it goes like this. They were originally going to put all 3 books as the first movie. Kind of like Aragon, they were going to butcher it. Then what happened was the 3rd book blew up. Like The Prisoner of Azkaban just became a ginormous monster to the point that Rowling's representation just gave Warner a number. And Warner was like, "Oh, we've never bought." It's like, no, this is just the rights for you to film it. Because he had made so much freaking money with that book that she didn't actually need the movie studio anymore, which is a really interesting point of leverage. But the thing, like the way they look at it, this is something I've learned as a freelancer even. The more money a company is willing to spend on something, the more it's likely to get done. And that is just the nature of the movie.
It's a good point.
That's the nature of the movie industry. Now, going to your point where I agree with you, I truly like from my perspective is like, okay, personally, as much as like Silver Queen as a concept, I love it more as a video game. I think that
Yeah.
I'm serious.
No, I hear you, man. That's interesting. That's the
Well,
first
because
person that told me that one. That's a new one.
Well, no, because why wouldn't you look at that? Because think about this, okay? Video games can do something that books can't do, and that's this: it's interacting with people. Well, it's a really good way. It's a really good way of creating a fan. Look at Raymond E. Feist back in the day when he was moving Krondor.
Big
He was
game, yeah.
yeah,
I
right.
played that game back in the day.
Yeah, right. So and he actually they did the last thing I read from him, because I truly think Krondor, that world is really cool. I love that
I
he
love
did.
it. I love it.
Yeah. But the thing is, he did like a whole video game tie-in with his books. And I think from but also just the way things are going today. I think if you look at entertainment properties going forward, I think video games are largely untapped. And I think if I was a smaller franchise, or a smaller series, I would be more interested there, because I think the upside, instead of fighting for Hollywood's attention,
Yeah, it's true.
I think the
It's a good
upside
point. I
there is,
mean, it's a very different type of industry,
but it's
and they
also,
don't build projects just, for the
oh,
sake
it's
of doing it.
sure, but I mean, but the thing is, I that's where I kind of want to play, because I look at it like this: movies, unless they're like dynamically excellent, generally kind of go through like the process. I mean, people love the Lord of the Rings movies, for example. But I don't think any of us are going to remember I don't remember The Hobbit in its entirety, because I did
Oh
right,
god.
right. Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
But if you make a really good game, a really good playable game,
Yeah.
right? You have something that's always going to potentially be there forever, because you're always going to experience with your audience every time they play the game. And
Yeah,
that's
I
just,
like that, and you know what else? There's a storytelling aspect of great games,
yes,
and
absolutely.
there are actually, I know of several, like, people I consider pretty serious sci-fi fantasy writers who write for games and
Yes.
for game companies. Like, I know somebody writes for Obsidian. I know somebody else writes for different. It's like you can tell that gaming companies are aware of the power of story to the
Yeah.
point that they're hiring people who we consider like excellent in this, in their abilities in this, to write the game stories and backdrops. I love that.
Well, look at Anthony Johnson, what he did with Resident Evil. Right, yeah, right. The last Resident Evil is really good, like a really great story. I'm a big fan I'm a big fan of games like the Ninja Theory Devil May Cry, or the Persona series. Like, it's ironically, like, when I first read your description, it reminded me just a touch, not completely, just a touch of Persona 5, because Persona 5 is a heist game. It's a sim
Oh,
slash heist
cool.
game. Right. So I was thinking, it's like, okay, this will be fun. Like, right. But that's the thing, like, you're like, this particular world. I'm not sure about the Deploying Dragons world, but the Silver Queen world, that, like, seriously, being one of the crew trying to steal the item before the battle. That sounds super fun,
I love
right?
it. No, it actually
Yeah.
make a good board game too. I like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I love to think about it. I gotta be honest. I do more board games and stuff than video games because video games were the thing I gave up to write. I was like, I can spend the rest of my life playing video games, or I could take that time and do something more productive.
Oh,
So
I totally
I
understand.
really try and keep away from the games because I enjoy them too. But um,
So what's your
no,
board
I'm
game?
with you. I love a good game, and I could see my book as this.
Well,
We have the
one
gaming rights, so maybe next year we'll talk again, and I'll have you ready to like do the test demo of the
well,
games.
I'm actually doing a Kickstarter with one of my books. I did an Alice in Wonderland Greek mythology mashup.
Oh, cool.
I accidentally invented a board game doing it. It was like one of those like little like moments where I wanted like because good fantasy has like a good map, right? Like
Oh
usually
yeah.
good fantasy have great maps, right? But but again, this is Alice in Wonderland. So mapping Wonderland just doesn't generally make sense.
Oh, because it's nonsensical the
Like,
layout of Wonderland.
yeah,
So I'm with you.
but what if you make it like a board, like a Snakes and Ladders board? It oddly suited it. And when I had that thought,
Actually, I can see that. That would be a good fit.
I mean,
There's like a chaos element to wherever you go.
absolutely. And in the process of me making that, coming up with that idea, I actually I had that question, like, how do you play that game? And I'm not kidding. When I asked that question, I got all these rules beamed into my head. It's like, oh, okay. So, and the other thing too, like, and I think this is one of the things going forward is, again, yes, there's storytelling in gaming, and language of that's interaction. You talk about board games, right? Board games, like if you look at something like Eldritch Horror, for example, or shoot, there's another one I'm thinking about, right? That's about as complex, but they have like this like world building aspect to it, even in setting up the game, let
Oh,
alone
man,
playing.
yeah.
You're right. You're right.
I'm in the middle of one with my brother-in-law. Like, took us like 4 hours to just like get started.
Yeah.
And like it's true. It feels like reading a super epic fantasy novel, like to get into this stuff. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
So could you imagine, your book in that environment? Like, should you legitimately imagine that, right? Because you could tell, like, you can almost like retell the story in a completely different way, and it would still be satisfying to a very specific audience, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I don't really know how you go about doing that, but I'm gonna look into it because
I just gave you a good idea, right? So
I'm
it's like,
intrigued. Yeah, I'm intrigued because as creators, like as as freelancer, you create something and then you're trying to look for the best way to get the most value out of that and license all the different rights to as many different parties as you can. And in book publishing, we generally have this weird thing where it's like there's the 2 or 3 things that always get licensed and then everything else never does, and it's a terrible waste. So like you
yeah,
said, hey, the odds of getting your stuff made into a Hollywood film are so low. Why not go a different route, like talk about gaming or merchandising or something like that? It's an interesting angle to try, and I think that
yeah,
it's got me thinking about it. So I'm glad we had this conversation. I'm
yeah.
like,
Just
make a game.
yeah. Well, it's just one of those. It's just one of those things. Like, I just look at this from a business standpoint, right? If you look at any business, we're just gonna go business big time. You have an intellectual property. That like, if you're talking about the real business of writing, you're
Yeah,
creating an intellectual property.
keep
Now, for
creating
whatever,
IP.
yeah, you're creating IP. So the way IP makes money in this world is how many different ways you sell the IP. That's
Yeah.
it. That's what it comes down to. Like, if you're talking like books, for example, there's your English language rights, there's your foreign rights, there's your first world rights, there's all these different rights that go for sale. And usually when you go with a publisher, they take a chunk of those rights,
Oh yeah.
right? Chunk of those rights. However, right? And again, this is one of those interesting things thinking about going forward in publishing is, okay, there's audiobook rights, there's like gaming and merchandising rights, and there's movie rights, and all these other rights. It's like, and even let's say it doesn't work out, there's still other ways you might be able to sell that idea, right? Without actually ever really thinking about it or doing it. It's like, how many different ways can I cookie cutter this IP into profit for me? Because the more profit you make, the more time you have to write more books. More time you have to write more books, the more time you make. You can create more new IP, right? And suddenly create that cycle over and over and over again, right?
Right. I mean, it's an interesting discussion because right now, so I mean, Silver Queendom, it's a standalone fantasy,
Yeah.
right? how I wrote it, how it was sold. And then, I do interviews with people like you, and people like, you're going to be writing more books like this. And I would love to, honestly, I would really love to write more books in this world with these characters. But it's truly dependent on how the book does, right? I mean, if the book finds a good readership and it makes financial sense for the publisher to do another book, then I'll get to do it. Then they'll want to do
Yeah,
another book. I
exactly.
want to, and we'll get to do it. So when you're talking about like diversifying the different ways that you use the rights, or basically it's about diversifying the channels you find and reach readers, is how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, no,
I'm
that's
for
totally.
it because I'm like, I don't care if they listen to the audiobook. I don't care if they read the ebook or the print book or a serialized version of it. I just want to reach as many people as I can so that
That's right.
I get to write more in that world. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
good to have conversations like these.
yeah. No, and again, and it's something I noticed. Like again, we're starting to think about and I think about this more and more now because again, we live in an era too where publishing has I say as decentralized, right, in quite a few ways. Because let's just, for the sake of argument, right, when I'm talking about when I put my board game, I'm probably kickstartering it, and the reason why I'm kickstartering it is because I don't, and this isn't a knock to Angry Robot or Baen or anybody like that. I just don't foresee them wanting to publish in two different media, especially one they're not very familiar with. Right, gaming is a very, very different animal than say books, but could I find a collector's market on Kickstarter? Because that's a different audience than what they're tapping into. The answer might be yes. Right now, and then again, talking about all these different genres, there's other ways to publish too. There's things like Unbound, Wattpad, like for just getting it out there.
Yeah,
There
that's
are
true.
right. So you have like so the thing about when you're thinking about rights like these now too is what audiences are your publishers reaching? Right? And would there be a way to capitalize on maybe other audiences like them that they're not? Right? And that's something that like, and I'm thinking that, and this might sound more small business than writing, but that's something that I've been thinking about with my own stuff, right? Because it's like I don't necessarily, again, even talking about traditional publishing, like it's a smaller window getting into Baen and Angry Robot and things like that now than it ever was because the traditional publishing thing has shrunk, but has opened up other avenues in other ways. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I can create an audience for myself elsewhere. Because if I can do that, that's also, if I do decide to want to go traditional, I'll have more leverage. There's also like a business mindset there, right? Whether that's true or not is another, or whether I can do that is another story. But the idea is like thinking in those terms, like there's more than one way to do this now. And you can explore that more and more and more, right? By the way, I'm not knocking Angry Robot or Baen or any of those guys.
Oh,
I'm
don't
just,
worry. I wouldn't let you knock them.
yeah, I'm not like they have,
No,
again,
it's. I mean, you make a good point because it's about finding the best way to find and reach an audience, and that is always going to be dependent on you and this book, and it varies from one project to the next. Like I have two books that are, yes, they're both traditionally published, but they're both with very different publishers. Let's be
yeah,
honest. And you know, Baen, to their credit, I was working with them, and they saw Silver Queendom first, and they said, this book's awesome, but it's not a
yeah,
Baen book. Like it's not for us. And if we had to guess, like what type of book is it, I would have said it's an Angry Robot book, and sure enough, that's where it landed. So you're right. Like you have to cater each approach you take. Like your approach, you're trying to do this. You got an interesting mashup, and you want to create the game, and it's got this story element to it. It wouldn't make sense for you to be going to try and approach one of these publishers. It makes
yeah,
sense for you to try and spearhead that because you know how to produce this sort of thing. So I'm with
yeah.
you 100%. And I have a follow-up question. Have you filed the DOJ versus PRH trial at all?
No,
I've heard
I
much
haven't seen
about
it.
that. So this is all, I think that honestly, everyone was fascinated in it because you had all these people under oath, just like laying bare the truth of the traditional publishing industry at the like at the big five level.
Yeah,
And it was in many ways pretty horrifying. Like a lot
yeah,
of stuff that you hear about, hey, like you throw these huge amounts of money at the book. Are you also going to throw that much marketing at it? And they're like, we don't know. We
No,
never really talk about that. And you're like, you don't talk about that? Just there were all kinds of revelations like that. But
no, that's like I'm aware of this because okay, so I know some like mid-list, even some high-level writers that have left traditional publishing for that very reason. What do you mean you don't market my books? Like, why are you what are you doing? Right?
and it's and I think one of the reasons it was so fascinating is the trial is what it is. I'm honestly not that much interested in the outcome of the trial. It's mostly that you had people offering a glimpse into stuff that generally is often not talked about, or that's
Yep.
behind a veil of privacy and confidentiality. And but there are tidbits of useful information in there. And one thing that was said that I thought was pretty compelling to me is they were asking one of the CEOs of Penguin Random or Simon or whoever, like, what do you see as the biggest threat to your business model? And you would think that you might guess what they would answer, but their answer was a little surprising to me. They said the biggest threat to our business model is subscription services.
Mm-hmm.
And they weren't specifically naming like KU, but they said that
Mm-hmm.
those services are growing in popularity, and you as from the point of view of like super readers, you understand why, but it's true. It really diminishes the value of a book, of an individual book, and it's hard to make a living, to change a business model from when you sell books and they each one is sold a certain way and royalties are paid a certain way, to where it's like a subscription, come and get all you can eat buffet. You just give us our 10 or 15 bucks a month. I do see that as a threat, and I wish those things weren't so popular and growing, because I can just see the math on the wall of how poorly that's going to go for authors. That's I guess how I feel about it.
Well, okay. There's two sides to that argument. I'm by the way, the biggest moment you would ask that in my head, we're just gonna say Amazon was the biggest thing I could threaten them. But the problem like those big five are facing, this is the real problem: speed. That's their challenge, because okay, we mentioned this with romance, right? There's a voracious readers that have an endless craving for content. Demand for content is through the roof and always will be. But what this is how, again, I'm thinking like really long term as an author a little bit here too. But the thing about it is, from the romance author can release it's not impossible to release 4 books in a year anymore, depending on what you do, how you do it. Now, again, some
You
it's
mean
less.
with a publisher, not doing
Or,
it yourself?
no, with doing it yourself. This is the
Oh
thing,
yeah, I
right?
mean, because if with yourself, like you said, there's somebody doing one every 6 weeks. So like, there's no rate limit.
There's no barrier, right? I know one dude, again, she's an anomaly. This is all she does, but even so, like the idea is, I mean, not everybody can do that, right? But it isn't inconceivable. Like when I was saying about myself, it's not inconceivable for me to write 3 books in a year. It's not, right? It's not inconceivable. But that's, and as you well know, when you go to a traditional publisher, in a lot of ways, that's just the first step, right? They have to market and they advertise, and there's value in advertising a book. Now, unless of course they're not doing that at all, in which case you're wondering like, what the fuck? But that's another discussion for another day. But for the purposes of this, right? Theoretically speaking, if you like, where I think an author might be able to make some serious dough, even in the future, is their own subscription service. If you were to sit there and think about what the Brandon Sanderson did with the Kickstarter, ultimately, yes, it's Brandon
Yeah.
Sanderson, right? But if you seriously think of what he actually did, he basically created a 1-year subscription model for his books, specifically to deliver to readers around the world. So now, you sit there and think about what he did there. That's exactly what he did. That's really what he did. So if you look at Amazon as a platform, in the nature of just staying on Amazon for anybody, you are absolutely correct. In the long run, this is going to kill a lot of writers' work. However, let's just say, for the sake of argument, you have a library, a catalog of say 20 books, and you decide, I want to do a subscription service, and I have a fan base that loves my stuff. I can create my own. I can actually leave the platform,
Yeah.
create a subscription service for myself that's affordable to me, because people will pay for a good thing. People will do that if they believe it's a very special kind of service, always. So what you got to start thinking, again, this is the business mind's going, is authors have to look at the fact that in the very long term, if we're going to rely on Amazon or Kobo or anybody to distribute our books digitally, then yeah, they're going to take their good chunk of money. But if you can find a way to do it yourself,
Yeah, to go direct. No, I'm with you. I think it's hard to get to the point where you have an audience big enough. That's the
yes,
barrier. But yeah, I mean, I guess that I was thinking more in the when you're working with companies that are providing these unlimited services, that's the danger, the economic danger.
oh, I know,
It's
like no,
because it motivates a company that offers that service is motivated to provide as much content and pay as little as possible for it.
absolutely,
It's different if it's you. If it's you, you say, I can provide good value and I can do it on a regular basis. And there are people that want to pay for this. It's kind of like the Patreon model, right? I mean, there are
yeah,
people who write regular stories for Patreon, and if they have enough of a following, it can do quite well. I mean,
yeah, no, it like I said, it's about like writers are going to have to become somewhat more ego driven, and that's a very and what I mean by
I
that,
thought we were already ego driven. That's why
kind
we're
of.
writing books.
But you know what I
Yeah.
mean. You got to go
I
out. You
know
got
what you're saying. I mean,
yeah,
I understand. Yeah, like, and it's not so much ego. It's you know, looking out for yourself and investing in yourself.
yeah,
And I think that's a polite way to put it, and I agree with you. You know,
yeah.
it's something that we as creators have to be always thinking about. It's not just the creation, but the business side of it. So
Well, and I mean, speaking of the big five, we're just going to talk about like I think smaller publishers like Baen. I know Baen's not a small publisher, but they're not. They're about medium size, maybe. Is that an accurate description of them? Right. So medium
I would
size.
say mid. I call them mid-sized publishers. I think that's an accurate way to put it.
Yeah.
They're
So
not major publishers. They're not the non-big five, but major like Disney level publishers, but they're mid-sized publishers.
yeah. So what I think. So there's a video game I think of when I think of the big five, and that is it's a very basic video game. It's one snake that eats everything and gets so big that eventually you burst it with a balloon and it
Yeah, I know
pops.
the game.
Yeah, everybody knows that game, right? So that's kind of how I see the big five going. But I do think this is what I do think. I'm looking at something like Baen or Angry Robot, or there's other small publishers that are really good at this too. They carve these little niches for themselves, and they get an audience that way. And I think there's a cool little spot for them in the future. But again, keeping this in mind, I think as an author, any kind of creative, whatever it is, the business ultimately your IP is what you make, but you're the product. Like whatever the way, like in a lot of ways you are the product. In some ways you are, and your books are how people support you. On the other hand, yeah, and again, in your IP, however they connect with you is what you have to push.
It's it's interesting. I thought you were going a different direction. I was prepared to say this, which I have worked with two big five publishers before these books, and I have to say that there is a dramatic difference in the level of marketing and support and attention that I get. And it's way better with these publishers,
Yes,
the
it is.
mid-sized publishers. It's kind of astonishing. You think, well, wait, what about this, billion-dollar company? Its resources. It's very feast or famine in those places, and there's a very, very tiny number of authors that get pretty much the lion's share of the attention, and everyone else is basically given very little. And
Mm-hmm.
it's too bad because the people that work there, they wish they had the luxury of helping everyone or something. But at a
Oh yeah,
mid-sized publisher, they can, because they're not trying to make one thing a blockbuster and everything else, something else.
no,
They work on creating good books that are good books and reach a good audience.
yeah,
And so there is a real strength to that business model.
yeah,
And it's something that I think isn't as vulnerable to hits and misses as big publishing is, because like these publishers, they don't make big risky bets on books that often like tank. And
yeah,
you hear about it every day. So from a lot of points of view, it's a smarter business model to conduct an operation like that. It's not trying to be the big five, but it's doing a very good, solid job and
yeah.
producing consistent, high quality titles. That's a good business model.
And the thing is, that's why I think they're going to last even through this, because
Yeah, I sure hope so. I mean,
no, I think
I
they
love
will,
it.
because they have an audience. They've built an audience, right? So as long as they don't deviate from their model, like that's the thing, right? It's a niche they're happy with, which is fantastic, right? It's one of those. I think it's beautiful, actually, right? Baen is always going to produce a certain quality in the book, and it's awesome because there's always going to be a demand for that certain kind of book. Angry Robot, um, they take more chances than Baen.
They
They
take
do,
a lot of risks. I mean, that's their motto, though. They're
yeah,
just
no, but but it works for them because they make some
it
really cool
does.
books.
It's funny. It's like Bane is a very specific thing, for the most
Mhm.
part. And then Angry Robot is like they, they they're defined by like doing everything. It's which I
Well,
think is kind of hilarious. I mean,
well, I think Angry Robot is really Passion Robot. That's what I
yeah,
actually
they
think.
are. I mean, you can just tell like they find these stories that most other publishers would be like, we have no idea how to even market this, or even we don't even understand what this. And they're just like, this is an awesome story, and we're going to put it out. And I
Yeah.
love that they have that courage to go for it.
But
It's
because
it's a good
here's the
thing.
thing, dude. The thing is, if they hit a home run, they're saying about Angry Robot. If they do hit a home run, it's a home run. That ball will fly for a
Yeah,
very
that's
long.
true. I mean, and
Yeah,
they've had
yeah,
titles like that. I mean, their books are really visible because of that
yeah.
and what they are. And you don't have to worry about Bane changing too much. But
No,
I will say sometimes it seems like they're inflexible, but they have maintained their position and what they do through like paying attention to these things, and it's admirable because you can see it working. Like you can see why it works for them. They pay very close attention to maintaining a brand and a level of
yeah,
consistency and quality. And one thing that's nice about Baen is they really invest in their authors. Like their authors do lots of books with them, many books.
yes,
I'm talking to people every day who are 15, 25 books into their Baen. They do long running series and stuff like that. That's something you don't see very often these days, and you don't see that level of investment. And so that's why I've liked working with them so much. One
yeah.
of the
No, they
like they're
believe
like
they believe,
they're into it, and they're like, I'm like, I'm thinking about this other book, and I'm not sure if it's gonna be. They're like, well, you should think about doing another one in that series that you have going like that. I like companies that think about it in that way of like building an author and their brand and
yeah.
stuff rather than, well, you had your shot.
Well, no, that's it. I Daw does that to some degree as well. Like Daw's another company that does that to some degree, but again, they are a little bit more prone to the big five, considering where they are in the food chain.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, they are big five,
yeah,
but
they are big five, right? But
we're a big five, but they do operate kind of like a smaller press inside the house of a big five. You're right. That and
yeah,
it's like you see
yeah,
sides.
that's the thing.
I know
Like
what you mean.
yeah, they do. So it's just like, but yeah, it's not enough. I this is gonna sound like an old man talking to clouds. I still remember Tor in the 90s. They would try all kinds of cool stuff here and there. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, right? But they would try. And I miss that. I really, really do. I really miss that because I thought they did some really cool shit. Even if it didn't all work, they did some really,
Yeah.
really cool shit. So um
Oh, all right. We should wrap. This has
we
been
should
awesome. We could probably talk all night if we wanted to, but I
no,
don't
no,
want to
it's
keep
all good.
you.
No, you got things to do, and we got to talk a little bit after it on anyway. So, Mr. Dan, I think we have an interview here. What do you think?
This is great. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah.
We should plan to do this again. I think we have more to talk about, but I enjoyed this, and I hope people will, hear about me, check me out, and check out
So
some of my
what?
books.
So it's magic pitch time. What's your book?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So talk to people about your. This is the end of the presentation, so you probably should
This
remind
is like
people
this
why
is
you're.
my moment to shine.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Dan Koboldt. I write books, and I write science fiction and fantasy, and I also write nonfiction books for writers. So I bet you got a lot of writers that listen to your
Oh,
podcast.
listen.
Putting in science and fiction, and I've got one that's for fantasy writers too. So please check me out and find me on Twitter. That's where you can find me if you're into the social media.
Do you have a website that people can go to?
Yes, I do. It's dankoble.com. I will give that to you so you can share it in the notes with this. But
Oh no, I'm gonna do it right now.
please, please come by and jump on my newsletter, and then you'll always know what's going. Oh, sweet! Look at that.
Yes,
Graphic
except
and everything.
I'm almost a
You can
trained
find out
professional.
everything I'm up to and everything I've done, and I'm a blogger too. So like I blog about stuff. I've had a long running blog, so it's your chance to stalk me and find me and talk to me about whatever you want. I'd like that very much.
All right. So, everybody watching, everybody listening, here is my advertisers. You want me to brand your project or yourself? You can definitely take a look at this right here. And beyond that, that will do it for this episode of Just Joshing. I'm back Thursday with a really cool guest from Soccer Mom to Strippers. It'll be a fun little show. Definitely check that out. For $8.50, I'll be pretty cool. But for everybody watching, everybody listening, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Stay inspired. Keep shining in the dark. And I'll see you guys next time.